Hello, everybody. Welcome along to this live stream with myself and Mr. Adrian Beasley. Adrian, hello, sir. How are we?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, good. How are you, Sam?
I'm very good. It's so nice to have you back. I could
Mm.
argue that we're kind of the originals, aren't we, on the live
Yeah,
streams? So, I mean,
yeah.
that was 2020, Adrian, wasn't
Shocking,
it?
isn't it?
Because it was COVID. We started doing live streams.
I know. It was mad. We were sat there doing stupid things with editing and pints of beer.
Yeah, and 4 years
Yeah.
later, we haven't grown up or changed.
No,
So there we go. Nothing's changed.
yeah.
But we are here to talk infrared tonight, and I'm going to get into that in a bit more detail. But just usual bit of housekeeping up at the beginning. If you are watching along, um, oh, let me know how we're going. The reason I said ooh is because I got a quick thing saying there might be an issue with the Facebook stream. This is coming through the streaming platform. It says they're going to keep trying, and if not, we may need to re-add it to Facebook. Not quite sure how to do that, Adrian, and I wasn't planning on having this issue in the first minute.
Oh dear.
So, whilst I chat away and I have a little jump on the Facebook thing to see what's going on there, maybe, Adrian,
Hmm.
you could, for the people who are watching along on YouTube, thank you very much. YouTube is all working beautifully.
Okay.
Could you explain just a little bit about what we're going to touch on tonight in terms of usage of infrared, in terms of some of the examples that you've got, and then
Hmm.
we'll actually jump into the images.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so infrared is a completely different way to capture an image, which uses a different part of the visible spectrum, or the invisible spectrum actually, beyond the deep infrared. And your camera doesn't capture any of the normal visible light at all. It just sees the wavelengths that are beyond our normal vision. And you can capture these kinds of images using a range of different tools. So you could use an ordinary camera with a filter that goes over to the lens, and that blocks all of the visible light but lets the infrared light pass through. Unfortunately, cameras are designed not to let the infrared light in, so whatever infrared light gets through is heavily filtered by your sensor, and there's still some remnants of it left. So the kind of shots that people take with cameras using these filters tend to be much longer exposures because it's very insensitive. So once you've had a go at that, which is obviously cheap to do because you can just buy a filter, an R72 filter, a filter that's designed to block the visible light. And once you've tried that, it's quite cheap and quick to do. You very quickly, if you like the images but don't like how slow it is and how grainy the images are, you can get your camera converted, and you can have a conversion done which will take off this blocking filter that's trying to block all the infrared. They remove that for you, and then you can optionally have a filter put on the inside of the camera, so you don't need to do anything with the lenses themselves. And there are various different options that give different effects. But the most popular would be 720 nanometers. And it's a great place to start because it's a very flexible filter, and you can do pretty much anything with that. These days, though, we have phones in our pockets, and we can use that same R72 filter that you bought to test your SLR with. You can just stick that over your camera lenses on your iPhone or your Samsung or whatever, and you'll be able to take infrared pictures directly using that handheld. And because of the wonderful technology in phones these days, the exposures, which would be quite long, are actually hand-holdable. And I certainly have plenty of examples of that. They tend to need a lot more infrared around for that to work, but certainly from kind of May onwards, you've generally got enough infrared light to be able to get pretty decent pictures from your phone. So it's a good place to dip your toe in if you're interested. Now, once you've captured the infrared image, though, what you do with it is the next big step. And many people convert their infrared pictures to black and white. It's quite a traditional process. And I certainly did that in the days of film early on. But there's nothing wrong with taking that raw information and converting it to color. It is a color image that's being captured. It just doesn't happen to have the same colors that we see with our eyes. There's a range of frequencies, a range of spectrums that can be shown, like the picture I've got behind me, where the wavelengths that are reflected from the grasses here happen to be converted to the red channel. And so the way that you visualize and the way that you convert infrared color images has quite a lot of flexibility and can create the most amazing images. How are we doing, Sam?
Excellent filling. Sorry, I was trying to multitask. I'm glad I had the pro on the call with me tonight. There is an issue with the Facebook stream which I can't solve, but I have let the Facebook people know in theory that we're here on YouTube and given them the link. So thank you for just filling in for me. And for everyone else, apologies if I wasn't wholly looking like I was listening. It's because I was trying to do two things at once. And like you all know, men massively struggle with that. So for everyone who is with us, let's just plow on as normal on YouTube. Adrian has obviously alluded a little bit there to some of the things, and we'll get back into more of those in more detail about the camera, about using your phone, even about some of the editing in Lightroom. And also, I think what's really cool about this, Adrian, if I can just throw in my two pence, knowing the slides where we're going, is that as a little bit as you've alluded to, that it's not just about doing it in black and white. There's a whole nother world of seeing things in color, and also not just seeing, I would say, some normal scenery that you get seen shot in IR. We've got a nice mix of subject matter and location that we can show you. So we're going to jump to the images in just a second. A quick look and hello to some of you who are with us. I can see a good number of you on the YouTube, which is great. Barbara and Mike. David's over in Germany. Calgary, fantastic. If you are logged in on YouTube, do let us know where you're watching from. We'll give you a shout, obviously, here on the stream. Alex is in London. And yes, YouTube is definitely working fine. So thank you for that. Good. Now, we are also we've been talking about IR, or I've set this up to talk about IR, also because Adrian has a workshop coming up in North Devon at the end of May, and again we'll sort of talk a little bit more about that as we go through the evening, because there's so much you can dive into, and it's a very specific things that you can talk about and learn about. So there's quite a fast track of knowledge in terms of going, that early learning curve that we have sometimes with tech, isn't there? And that this definitely would fall into that. So I've done enough talking. I've dropped Adrian in it enough as well. Let's get into the images. And I thought when we were chatting about this, Adrian, it might be nice if we could just kind of expand a little bit on IR and infrared and how you some of your early experiences, I suppose. That's what we're angling at here.
Yes, I did. I used infrared black and white film and infrared color film in the early days. This is an example by Dave. And it's difficult to handle, as you can see. You had to keep the infrared film in its pot. You couldn't take it out and put it into the back of your camera because it would expose it. So you had to change the film in the dark. So you used to carry a dark bag around with me, put the camera in the dark bag and change the film. And this particular, or these particular frames are shot with my traditional sort of 35mm SLR. But I actually started to use this film in my Mamiya 7, which is a medium format camera. And you could get 2 frames at the same time within that. So I remember halfway up Snowdon having my Mamiya in a bag trying to change the film over, which was quite a challenge.
Not ideal.
And this is actually the Maldives. And I thought, this would be a great place to take it somewhere hot. And I did the craziest thing ever was using color infrared film in my Mamiya 7 in a plastic bag underwater.
What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, everything.
Terrible idea. But yeah, if we have a look on the next couple of slides, the next couple of slides are shot on the Kodak's color infrared film. And it just made the most amazing otherworldly images. And it just naturally maps the colors to these weird, these weird renderings. And all we're seeing here is the way that the infrared light is reflected. So the bright areas are areas where, for example, the red ferns they're reflecting the infrared light quite strongly. So they're bright. The darker areas, like the dark green water, the water absorbs the infrared light and doesn't reflect it so much. So you get that same effect as you would do in black and white, where you get absorption and reflection, but mapped color tones as well, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of as we've talked about already, and we'll expand on more. It's it's a bit like seeing the world through new eyes again, isn't it? And
Yeah.
the glory of that is then creatively, what does that mean? How can I
Yeah.
play with that? How can I
Yeah.
pull, reality backwards, forwards, but those tonal shifts, because it's a whole new kind of lexicon you have to kind of get your head around, I suppose. And you mentioned as well how humans, we've got a couple of human
Yeah.
examples in here, haven't we?
Humans.
This was a thing you pointed out to me earlier, which I thought was quite
Yeah.
fun. On the adult's arm here, if anyone can see that.
Yeah, you can see the blood vessels, the dark blood vessels, but also look at the eyes of my daughter. Black, completely black,
Yeah.
absorbing the infrared light and nothing's coming out. And so, yeah, really quite strange effects. Now, these colors are wild. Now, bear in mind, this was shot with a film camera. So there's no way of knowing what you're getting. You're just shooting, and then you get the roll of film back and you go, whoa. There's really no way of knowing what's coming. And we're so lucky with digital these days that we can actually see what's going on.
Yeah.
So whilst some of these pictures will have extreme colors, you can work very subtly with it too. So I quite like some of the bold stuff, but the subtlety can be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, and we're going to give some examples as we go on throughout the course of the evening of some more classic things and a little bit more avant-garde, perhaps is not quite the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I suppose the sort of gateway and the sort of classic look that a lot of people think of when they consider infrared photography is images a little more like this, isn't it? That's what we've become used to seeing on the various places people share images and so on and so forth. But as I've alluded to, we are going to cover a lot of different stuff here. So hopefully everyone watching, you can go away inspired and creatively enthused about how you might want to use this as a new avenue. But why do you think, Adrian, these, and we've got a couple of these classic black and whites, why do you think that's been maybe the more commonly shared visual of IR?
I think so. This could have been taken on film, although if it was taken on film, it would be a whole lot more grainy. Good old high-speed Kodak infrared black and white film was really ballsy, but it also had something interesting going on. So the brighter bits of the image would bounce back off the film and bounce off the back of the lens, and then scatter the light. So you'd have these bright halos around the brightest bits. You have a sort of a ghostly look to it. So it had its own very interesting character. But I think black and white was very easy to deal with and to manage. And so when you look at digital and the options that we have in digital, the way that you can change the colors and manipulate the colors, you couldn't do that with film. So with film, you just got what you got. So I think the film was very Marmite. I think because you couldn't really manipulate those colors, it just came as it was. With digital now, we've got a lot more control. So I think it's just not been picked back up again by people to with the new tools that we have to work with, which I think is a really good avenue. If you're finding yourself a little bit creatively blocked and you want to do something a bit different, this could be a fantastic way to get yourself out of that.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about using in all manner of scenarios, color and black and white, also all manner of locations as well. And we wanted to touch on a couple of the places you're going to visit, and obviously in and around you, generally in North Devon and around the coastal things. And just actually before I throw to that, I can see a question has come in. And what I'm going to say actually is, if you are watching on, you have specific technical questions and or about the images as you go, do please put them in the comments. I may pick them up as we go, or I may just pause here and there and tackle 2 or 3 questions at once, and then we'll jump back into it. But if you have it in your head, blurt it out, and if I don't ask it straight away, I haven't missed it, I will come back to it. So let's just touch a little bit on where we are here, Adrian, in the next couple of shots.
Yeah, so this one is Braunton Burrows. This is not far from where we live here. It's a big dune system, and there's something just rather magical, I think, about the dunes, about the grasses, and about the clouds. So the skies in infrared tend to be rendered much more boldly and with much more detail than perhaps you might normally get with a color image or with a conventional image. And infrared, because of the way that the light is scattered in the atmosphere, the blue light in particular is scattered. The infrared light isn't scattered in the same way. So when you're looking only at the infrared sky, what you're seeing is something that is somewhat different to the way we see it with conventional light. But you can see the grasses here are rendered more pale. They reflect the infrared light quite strongly. So grass, which might typically in a black and white image be dark in your picture, is going to become light. And this will be the case for all foliage pretty much. Whereas, water and stones and so on will go black. And this is kind of got a little bit of that high speed the halation effect that you get with the black and white film. It's sort of got a soft nature to the reflected light from the grasses. So it's just an interesting alternative way to work with if you like black and white. And I love black and white. This again is this is actually Saunton Sound, so a little bit beyond Braunton, just in the same area, but nearby the coast. But there's a lot of choices of locations that have where you've got this quite nice combination of sky and grasses and dunes.
Can I ask, Adrian? And this might be, I'm trying to be in the mind of the viewer to some degree as well a bit tonight, and also myself, because I haven't hugely experimented in this field. Obviously, in Lightroom, there are some preset or the infrared type presets, shall we say. Now, within the realms of keeping it in the layman's terms and without wishing to throw too much at you in one thing, is it actually impossible, a bit like you can't simulate a polarizer with a filter? Is it fair to say it's actually, I kind of know the answer to some degree, but it is impossible to cheat it? Although you can get close with a preset, you can't ever quite replicate, can you? Is that fair to say?
So if I took this shot in color, if I converted it to black and white but pushed up the brightness of the green channel, then if this was grass, it would kind of have that look, have a similar look. So there are some things that you can do. You can use presets and they will give you a kind of a feel of an infrared, but there are certain things that it simply can't do. And although these days AI is so damn clever, we might well see the AI working out what's water and what's sky and actually doing the right kind of changes to those things. In the end, it's, as you say, like a polarizer. It's an optical effect that can't be simulated afterwards. Once the image is captured, the only thing you can do is kind of approximate to it. But certain things will respond in different ways, and the presets simply wouldn't know that. Shooting in infrared, you're capturing a completely different part of the visible spectrum or non-visible spectrum, part of the electromagnetic spectrum beyond the visible. And the way that that's translated into color or black and white is quite different from what a preset would do.
And in terms of what you're seeing in the field, if you've got a camera converted, so let's say someone has gone and got their camera converted, you are presumably then through your live view or your back of your screen, you're then seeing that IR preview in the screen. So that's going to affect your composition, your understanding of the tonal values, which obviously when you're doing it in the edit is an after the fact. And obviously we're always trying to talk about bringing, or how interesting it can be when that process is brought forward, right?
Yes, no, that's a really good point. Just like when I'm shooting for black and white, my camera is switched to black and white. So I see the world in black and white, I capture and compose exactly as he says, Sam. It's something that really helps is if you can visualize and see it in the final color space or black and white space. It really helps. Now, there are a few issues to overcome. When you look at the image on the back of your camera, if you're shooting in infrared, what you'll actually see is a pretty red-pink look. And that's because the only channel in your camera that's really capturing much information is the red channel. So it looks like it's red. Now, you can do something inside the camera. You can do something called a custom white balance, where you can kind of neutralize that red look and make it look a little bit more neutral. There's some pros and cons with that, and I go into the sort of the technical details of that when we're on the course. But it is possible at least to have a look that's not quite as extreme as this, but it will be looking similar to this when you're shooting.
Yeah, which can inspire the shot where you might think there is no shot, or you see, oh wow, there is really a shot here in the same way. you can do that with black and white or whatever it might be.
Yes.
So
and it is amazing. You put the camera to your eye and you go, whoa,
yeah,
the world's looking like
not
that.
There. Yeah. I mean, this is beautiful because it is this, I suppose the challenge sometimes with either a technique or a procedure or I don't know what we call infrared really. It's not really a technique, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The challenge is sometimes we want to really lean into that and that becomes part of the image itself, and other times what that's doing is quite subtle in the background and we may or may not even twig that that's what's going on, but it just creates a beautiful result. This is a sort of prime example of that for me. Yes, maybe to the considered eye you might think this has to probably be an infrared shot, but not necessarily. You know what I mean? It could quite easily be black and white. Normal black and white, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've included, for that reason, I've included some quite bold renderings, and I've also included some much more subtle renderings. And hopefully the more subtle renderings may well appeal to those that it's not a gimmick. I definitely get what you're saying. It's this infrared is a whole area to explore. It's not a one-trick pony.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. There is just on this slide before we jump into towards some color. I mean, what is this, a long exposure infrared?
It is. It's a long exposure infrared. I'm walking along the coast, following the horizon as best I can. So this will probably be a 30-second exposure. But in infrared, of course, the water's gone black. It doesn't reflect the infrared. The sand is nice and white, and it's all nicely smoothed out. So, you can do ICM in infrared. Why not? And it gives you the same opportunities, but a different look.
It's like landing on another planet, but with all your same photography skills that you have and the ways you see things and techniques you have already in your arsenal, etc. So, but now what you're pointing them at reacts differently. So you've got just like new universe going on.
Yes. It's very exciting. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, I'm getting more and more excited.
You are, aren't you?
That's partly because I've given up caring about the Facebook thing and I'm just rolling with it now. No, just before because we're going to jump into some color images because we've got loads actually. We're not going to get through everything tonight, but we're just going to get through what we get through. But we do want to capture any questions, so I'm going to very quickly pick up on a couple of them while we've got a second before we jump into the colors. So. Adrian, are you using full spectrum with filters or a straight conversion to a known NM value?
Yes, I am. I have 3 different infrared converted cameras. I have a wacky one. I have a monochrome camera that is converted to infrared. How about that? Ooh. That's weird. So we've stripped off the color pixels and taken off the infrared filter. That's just way out there. So that's full spectrum, except that it's black and white. But anyway, and then I have 2 other color cameras, both of which are full spectrum. Actually, I have those simply because I bought them from eBay. And this is a great tip. You can, of course, take a camera maybe that you're not using right now, send it away and have it converted to infrared. That will cost you £300 to £400. Or you could buy something from eBay. And what's rather nice about that is often people have their cameras converted and then they don't like it. They don't get on with it. So they'll sell them. And you'll often get a really good bargain. And I have two great cameras that I bought that way. So they just happen to be full spectrum. In other words, they don't have a dedicated filter inside the camera itself. But it so happens for my Sony, and I think for some of the other cameras out there, you can buy a filter, the infrared filter, and fit it inside the body of the camera. So you don't then need to have any particular filters on the lenses. And then you can actually swap that filter out for the different versions that you can use for infrared. You can even put back in a filter that simulates what used to be on your camera sensor, so your camera's returned to its normal state. But I don't think you'd ever do that. I think you're probably going to dedicate your camera to a particular use for infrared. If you're going to get a conversion done and you want to have a particular filter built in, I'd certainly recommend the 720 nanometer conversion. The reason for that is it's easy to make the 720 converted camera look like other conversions, but it's not very easy if you go for something like 850 or 950. I had a 950 filter. You can't go backwards. So the 720 gives you scope to have different versions of filters going on. So technically that's a great way to start. But if you don't have any filter built in at all, it's called full spectrum, and it allows you to choose the filter and you fit it manually yourself afterwards.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the question, Mike.
Aha.
Other Mike, second Mike. We may not do this in great detail for obvious reasons, but maybe a quick thought on this, Adrian. Could you talk through hotspots, why some lenses produce worse results than others, or how much of an issue that might be for people to be aware of and look out for?
Yeah, so the camera is not designed to work in the infrared region. So there's lots of cunning anti-reflective coatings and so on that you have on all of your lenses. Strangely, they don't work very well in infrared. So if you have infrared light coming through your camera, then you can get the light bouncing off the sensor itself and onto the back of the lens and then back onto the sensor. So it can create something called a hotspot, which is a bright circle in the center of the image. It tends to get worse the smaller you make your aperture. So as you stop your camera down, you'll tend to notice that hotspot much more clearly. It used to happen with film as well, but it seems to be that on digital cameras, it's worse. And I think part of the reason for that is the anti-reflective coatings on modern lenses are so good in the optical region, they are actually worse in the infrared region. So somebody explained it to me once as being a balloon. You push it down here and it comes up there. So if you make it better in the optical for preventing reflection, it gets worse in the infrared region. So hotspots can get worse. So you'll probably find your best infrared lens will be your old kit lens or something like that. The cheaper lenses quite often are quite good, but there are databases out there where you can look up a lens and see how good or bad it is. Now, when we're working with images, and in fact, the next two images, Sam, show this rather well. They are color, but I can show you how that works. So this is a color image which I've fixed a hotspot on, but the next one, there's still remnants of that hotspot in the center. You can sort of see a pale purple circular bit. And it sort of changes as you go further out from the center. The hotspot's always at the center because it's reflecting off the back of the center of the lens. And well, the shape of that rear element is what dictates how it occurs on the sensor. So they're not always like that, but the large majority of lenses are. The problem with fixing it is really quite tricky because in the hotspot on a color image, it isn't just changing in intensity and contrast, it's also changing in color. So you've got quite a complicated fix to put in here. You can't just slap a radial filter in the middle and just change it slightly, which you can do with black and white. So if you have hotspots on a black and white image, it's usually pretty straightforward to fix. Simple radial filter will almost always fix it. So it's not the end of the world if you have a camera with hotspots. You can fix it after, or you could go check out the database, find a lens that's particularly good in infrared and maybe buy that and use that as your dedicated lens.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the question, Mike. A couple of others that had questions relating to hotspots. I think Adrian sort of covered in his answer there in terms of does the aperture size matter? Yes, it seems like it does. And vintage film lenses, yes and no, in that he mentioned it can vary depending on sometimes the newer tech actually makes it worse, but there is information out there. So I think just to let me add one really simple question in from, if I'm a viewer out there and I want to start playing with this, I know you mentioned maybe looking on eBay or getting something on, have you got experience of what would be a fairly cheap, decent-ish converted camera / lens to maybe jump in on? I know there was a time when everyone was converting Canon 6Ds, weren't they? But what have you seen with people and your own experience that might be a way in without breaking the bank?
Yeah, I mean, I've always tried to look for a body that I can use my existing lenses on. That just makes a lot of sense. So my first converted one was a Sony A6000. It's the compact. It just so happens that it works with all of my other Sony lenses. So that was a good, quick way in. It came with a kit lens, actually, and the kit lens wasn't bad. But I tended to have to shoot f8 or wider to sort of get rid of most of the problems with hotspots. Actually, it seemed to be okay for most of the pictures that I take. I guess I'm not a traditional landscape photographer, so I'm not taking, generally speaking, I'm not taking sharp front to back type pictures. I'm usually finding a subject and getting that sharp, which means I'll work with wider apertures, so it's not such a problem for me. But yeah, so I would say if you can buy a body from the your normal lens range, that makes sense. But given it's going to be dedicated to infrared, perhaps having a camera that's coming from another family isn't such a bad idea. You do have, you've got all the problems with batteries and chargers and all those other things that you end up having to get 2 lots of. So it probably in the end is cheaper to try and find a body of, from your existing system.
Yeah. Okay. And final bit just on the chat, and then we're going to just jump into images again. But it's really great. Do ask the questions. Now is the time. We've got Adrian here, and I will act as the conduit, as it were. Mike has mentioned, for those listening in, Kolari apparently have a comprehensive list of lenses that do or don't have hotspots. So
Absolutely.
everyone can find that. Just Google.
Yeah,
Kolari.
there's several big databases out there that people have put together over the years, and you can Google them and you'll find them. So a good resource for checking out what you've got already, and if you've got one that's not so good, finding a better one.
Stick it on eBay and someone else will buy it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for giving us the resource there. Whilst we were talking, I showed obviously 2 or 3 of these color images, and I like I'm just going to flick through them. I like these 3 just as a set because they've got kind of a vibe that would work really nicely as a little panel of 3 on a print or something like that. Obviously, the pink is an example of how what would normally be there, probably a light browny thing, but just
browny yellow
light.
Something like that. Yeah.
And these are obviously examples of slightly more I would say out there use of it, which is exactly the one behind. But we've also got which I think is really interesting, the next 2 or 3 slides are, I would say, like we alluded to before, they're different whilst being subtly used of the technique. Is that fair to say? And we wanted to mention about woodland, didn't we, especially?
Yeah, I think so. And woodland is a tough subject. It can be chaotic, it can be dark, it can be difficult contrast ranges and so on. And actually, infrared might be another way to tackle woodland. If you've got a lot of woodland near you and you've struggled with it, then perhaps taking a look at infrared might be a good thing to do. And it's also worth me pointing out that the strength of the infrared response, if you like, the dynamic range, changes with the amount of sun. So in the summer, it will be extreme, but in the winter, you still can use infrared. And what's more interesting about that is the effect is much more subtle, and particularly for woodland and so on, I think it is fabulous and really beautiful. So, I mean, a lot of the infrared that I would shoot would normally be outside of the peak seasons. July, August are the kind of peak sun seasons. I would often take pictures in October, November, or February, March, April. Now, right now is great. You won't get such a strong impact, but what you get is a different rendering. So, as we're seeing here, that the subtlety can be really rather beautiful, and it just shifts it away from perhaps what you're used to.
I really love this. It's beautiful. It's like a etching. It's kind of an etching sort of feel to it to me. And obviously, what would actually be quite heavy, there'd be a lot of density in that, wouldn't there? Normally, is lightened, and our eye is relieved accordingly, and we interact with it in a different way. So it's a really beautiful use of it. And there's a couple of others here we mentioned on the color. Oh, Charlie's on. Charlie's asked a question, Adrian.
Okay.
Now, here we go. If you had a choice, would you actually go back to dedicated infrared film and then scan?
No, and I'll tell you why. Hairs, dust, all the other crap that comes with scanning film. I was never a fan of scanning film. That digital just totally fixes that. Back in, you can't buy Kodak color infrared film. It went out with nasty chemicals and all sorts of other things when Europe sort of beat us around the head and said you need to do this properly. So all of those things disappeared. The black and whites held on for a little bit, but it's now very difficult to get black and white sensitive infrared. But actually, digital cameras are way more sensitive to infrared than film ever was. So we've got way more scope with the digital sensors. So digital sensors got up to sort of like 1200 nanometers or something. From in our visible world, we go from about 400 to about 700. And then there's this enormous stretch beyond that, but the film only went a little bit beyond that. And so it was only sensitive to infrared a small amount, but then digital is way more sensitive out in the depths of infrared. So there's more scope with digital than there ever was with film. And I think the fact that you can see it, you can see it live, just like everything else that we do in digital. I really like that a lot. So it's quite fun to look through my old color slides, and but it's just so uncontrollable. And I do like to get in there.
That's part of the thrill, wasn't it? It was not always quite knowing what you were going to get. I mean, in film generally, let alone infrared film, that's even more of a shocker. But I suppose that's been substituted by the instant feedback ability to adapt in the field and maybe pursue the idea further whilst you're out artistically. But thank you, Charlie. Understood. Thank you for the question. I think it's there's always a romance, isn't there, to the film look, and I would imagine that was true of the infrared film as well. There's a certain something that digital you can't replicate, perhaps.
Yeah, and I would, going back, actually pick up on Charlie's point about the black and white high speed, Codex high speed black and white infrared was unusual. And although I've seen plenty of filters and Photoshop techniques and so on that try to simulate it, I don't think they really look the same. And you can get close to it, but there is something really rather lovely about the glowing highlights and things like that you get. It is quite grungy and vintage, but no way going back to scanning film.
No, yeah, it's scanning. The actual scanning bit's horrible, isn't it?
That's the absolutely.
This is a lovely example again of using it in a color fashion, though, to the point where I'm kind of unsure what it would have been.
Yes,
not that it even matters. But I suppose we're trying to break that down a bit today to take people behind the camera, aren't we? That's not how we should normally view things. We shouldn't try to just wholly deconstruct, but we do in these environments a little bit. But another good example, in the woodland especially.
Absolutely, and it looks like there could have been tulips over there, daffodils, over there, but they're not clearly. But that combinations of yellows and oranges and blues is a lovely combination anyway. There's some rubbish editing on the left-hand side there, these little fingers coming in.
Oh, well, I'll switch on then to something a little bit more. I hope everyone's got the sunglasses on.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my back garden and shot in the summer. It's just crazy, right? It's just completely crazy. And the colors that the images come out, you have control over. So traditionally, people would use Photoshop to do what we call color swaps and so on, and various other techniques. All of the pictures that I make and all of the editing and all of the pictures you'll see tonight are all done inside Lightroom with no Photoshop. So that's another thing that I help people with when we work with it. You can do crazy things. So and this is an example. I suppose it's because I do really enjoy. I just enjoy playing with images, and so sometimes I'm quite happy to go this far.
Yeah, well, you've got to go out that far to realize how far you've gone. Sometimes
you bet, Sam. Absolutely.
And I think what could be really fun and creative is a way to, if you found this sort of aesthetic, a little series or a way to tie that into a point or some, even I'm thinking all sorts of environmental things might be a good canvas for this in a way, but some other story that you could tie around that, it would create that otherworldly vibe, but relate it back to ours in a way. So there's loads of cool stuff you could do, and we wanted to give you some of that extremity. Yeah. And then, like we say, the flip side is back towards something more. I call this a fairy tale look, isn't it? But
It is, and I really like this sort of thing. So when you get control over it, you can decide where the colors are, what they are, and how strong they are. And in this case, I think that it looks really interesting. It looks unusual, and it doesn't look fake, which it of course entirely is. It's nothing you can see. All of the colors. Well, some of the colors, weirdly, some of the colors appear to come across naturally. So there's some silver birches in there, which are, to all intents and purposes, the bark has come out pretty much what it would normally come out. And that always makes me think, why is that? But it does. And some of the colors look very close to the original colors, but it's often by chance as much as anything.
But that's I suppose that's part of the joy of it, isn't it? And I think we've talking about the tech. We've been talking about converted cameras so far, primarily, haven't we? And ways to do that. But there is also a way of shooting infrared using your mobile phone, correct?
Yes. So this was a kind of oh my God moment for me. I was working with a group, it was a few years ago now, with a phone that's older than the one I've got now as well. And I just happened to have an R72 filter with me, of course. We were doing some infrared. And I just put it over the phone and shot this handheld. And I looked at it on the phone and thought, oh, that's quite nice. Of course, it came out red on the phone. So I did a little quick black and white conversion. And I thought, oh, that's quite nice. When I got back to the computer and had a look at it a bit more carefully, I was shocked. It was sharp and it was fully detailed. And I actually have printed this now A1. And in fact, I printed this on, you'll probably know the paper, Sam, the Hahnemuller metallic rag, which has got the silver surface. And it's just lovely. So full size A1 from my old phone. Shocking. Wow. So you do need decent amount of sun. So this would have been taken in quite good sun. So it would have been May, June time with the sun fully out to get enough signal for the phone to get a good quality rendering. You'll get the effect at any time. And it's probably best if you shoot in one of the black and white modes so that you can see it in real time. That's quite a good idea. But it does work. And if you want a quick way in, maybe this is actually a better way to get going with infrared than even buying a filter for your SLR. The problem with an SLR is it's got this filter inside that's trying to defeat the infrared, and it's quite a strong filter. But the phones, they don't want to spend any money on that stuff. So the infrared filter that's in your phone is quite weak. So that means a lot more of the infrared light will get through to the sensor, and that's why we get better results.
So are there dedicated phone-sized filters?
Nope.
These you just
I'm
use
your... see if I can. No, I can't find it at the moment. If you look in, can go and Google filter add-ons for your phone. You can get like these clips that clip over, and they have a standard ring, maybe a 67mm ring or something like that. You can thread on an ordinary filter.
Okay. So just with an adapter, it's iPhone
an adapter.
thing to
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that's a neat way.
Even if you hold it, you can probably take a few test shots just by holding the filter over the lenses. You'll get the idea from it, and then if that sort of works for you, then go and get yourself the next step. Get a little clip on, and I've taken a lot of pictures with the phone, but it does tend to need a bit more of the sun to get this kind of effect. But yeah, once we get into May, June, it's not far off now.
Yeah,
then you should be able to use it.
Cool. Okay, well there you go, everyone. There's a neat way in.
Yeah,
we've got a couple more nice woodland related images.
Yeah. Now this is Stornoway in the snow, which is quite intriguing. Silver birch or purple birch, and rather lovely softness of rendering. Of course, you can dial up and down the saturation to where you like it, and the color to where you like it. So, but it is remarkable being able to shoot woodland in a different way. And in fact, I think the next image is from woodland nearby me. So I'm sure many people know Wisman's Wood, and this is normally moss is green normally, and the ferns that grow off the trees are normally not that color either. Again, it's a kind of otherworldly look about it, which is intriguing, really intriguing.
Yeah. Is this another snow image, Adrian?
It's not actually. This is I think this is from a woodland round near we are, but it has that feel about it, doesn't it? It's just quite peculiar. Yeah, just lovely the way that it renders an image, and sort of soft pinks and purples with the blues. That combination seems to be a rather lovely combination.
Got another.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So again, so you start looking at everything, and you go, "Well, I wonder what color that is. I wonder what color that is." And you point your camera at everything because you're fascinated to see how that might come out. Now, the only frustrating thing with shooting color is you can't see the color in camera. So you're just capturing the image, and then when you bring it back to the computer, that's when you can flip it into the colors and see it. I would love to have a camera that's shot this way. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, there you go, the next level. You mentioned all the editing you're doing in Lightroom, and obviously that color and is process. The color processing side of things is something you go into in a lot more detail on the workshop. And I suppose this is a good point just to mention to everyone. If you did want to fully dive in and get the fast track A to Z how it all works, then Adrian does do an infrared photography workshop in North Devon, 28th to 31st of May. I believe there's just a few spaces available on this year. So if you are interested in joining Adrian for that, it's an area he knows super well, obviously living nearby, and he'll be able to take you to all the a variety of places that you can make sense of in infrared as well.
Yeah, we'll try a number of different things. So we'll do some coastline. We've got some sort of gardens, and a sort of a mixture of different topics.
Yeah, it's cool. I think especially if you want to, if you feel like you just need to try something different, or you've had a little bit of a lull, or you just want to kickstart again in a particular direction, this is a nice way to do it. There's
so skies and buildings and stuff. I love building in black and white, and it's really interesting. The black and whites themselves and concrete and brick and so on doesn't really change that much, but in color it does. In black and white, not so much. So on the next slide, this is actually the underside of the high level bridge in Barnstable. And that's the sky on the right. So it's sky versus concrete. And shocking, isn't it? I love it. It just
looks like a boat. It looks like the hull of a boat, the peeling paint on the hull of a boat.
Oh, yeah. See,
I've got this is so weird. I have an image that looks basically the same as this from a boat. Yeah. Same colors.
Got a dust spot on there. Oops. But so we use this. So I play in a band. We use this as one of our band cover shots. I sent it to one of the other guys in the band. Said, "Oh, this is lovely. What is it?" But it's so it just changes all sorts of possibilities and gives I don't know if I say, as you said, an injection of creativity, just a bit of a mix up of what you're normally going to do, shake you out of your doldrums and do something a bit different. Infrared could do that for you.
And I think with anything that's different like this, or a technique or a bit of equipment or whatever it might be, the great thing to do is have these things in your arsenal, so that when you are in a location or in somewhere new or wanting to try something different, you can then apply the skill or the technique or the equipment that you know and understand that's relevant to that place, that makes sense to your artistic intent at that point as well. So the more tools you have, it's like the chef turning up in a kitchen. We're like that with photographers. We turn up, we've got whatever ingredients are there, and we have to use our skills to make something happen, right? And the more skills you have and the more understanding of how scenes and locations can be interpreted and reinterpreted, then the more you will take from all sorts of places. I suppose that's probably the best way to say it.
I think so. I think it kind of gives you something that's not normal, and in dealing with it, you'll do things you wouldn't have done normally. So it might help you. You mentioned you've got to go, you've really got to go beyond the boundaries to know when it's too far. You've got to push yourself. If you've already start with something that isn't normal, you're going to approach it differently. And I think that could also help you maybe with your editing for normal cases, for normal photography, just doing that. This is a building, some of you may know this, in Swanage, which was a bit derelict. Somebody actually painted on the front of the building where you see the doorway. There is no doorway there. That's a painting of a doorway, and it's a painting of the rendering coming down on the front of the building. I thought that was rather lovely. But the clouds and the sun that's going on there works great. So infrared, black and white buildings works. They just work just as well. It's and in color, you've just got a whole load of new options.
Adrian, I'm just going to pick up on a couple of other things that I didn't get to before. And again, if anyone's watching out there and you've got any infrared related questions, do let us know. Oh no, sorry, I've said that one already, haven't I? There was something I saw. Oh, where's it gone? David asked about whether you do it in Lightroom or Photoshop, and it's all in Lightroom. So we've hit that, haven't we, already? And Jeffrey asks, Micro Four Thirds camera struggle with refraction. If that's specific to the query here about infrared, or if that's a general problem.
Okay, so I'm not aware of that being a problem with 4/3 cameras. There are some issues if you want to do long exposure infrared. Some cameras have internal infrared sources, although I think that went out with film. That used to be a problem with film because they used to have a sprocket counter that was typically a little infrared source and emitter and detector, which wouldn't be seen by conventional film, but of course infrared film got fogged by it. I don't think there's any of that going on inside your camera these days, but there may be. And struggling with refraction, I'm not sure why that's specifically a problem for the 4/3 community. I don't know. So it's just something I don't know about.
Checking on the specific camera lens, etc. online, if there's any info there.
Yeah.
I was going to just, before I ask another one from Mike, was in terms of actually shooting, do you shoot in any different way in terms of capturing the data, in terms of exposing to the right, you know what I'm saying? Is there,
I do.
Do you allow for that a little bit?
I do. I'll again, that's something we'll go into in more detail on the workshop. But there are some little gotchas which you need to be careful of because of the way that the camera is working. It's not normal, and the metering system doesn't work in the same way. So it used to be worse with film, to be fair, because with film, the light meter didn't meter infrared light; it metered visible light. So even getting the exposure right was uncertain. With digital, it's not like that because the sensor is seeing the image. A mirrorless is seeing the actual light, so it's doing a metering of that. But the way that you use it, the white balance settings and things like that you use, there is a particular special way I do that. That's a special way I do that. And that's something that I'll share.
Out in Devon. Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, it's a techie thing that I've kind of come to. It's a solution I've come to, and I think it's unusual. So so it's something that I do slightly differently when we're working with infrared.
And in general terms, with any of the workshops, especially with Adrian, there is time obviously given, especially in that scenario, to the developing stuff as well, because there's no point just taking you all out and then going, when you get home, good luck with all of that.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of time. I don't know what the split is, and it may depend on the conditions.
Well, it's a capture to print workshop, so we'll spend an entire day of editing and printing. And obviously prior to that point, prior to the final day, we'll be talking through the technical stuff anyway, so the shooting side, but I'll be explaining why we're shooting the way we're shooting, and also give examples during the days leading up to the actual editing day anyway. So you'll go home with prints, and that, from my point of view, that's the end point. The digital, the card of images is not an endpoint. The prints are an endpoint, and if you can make a good print, then I think you've got a good control of the whole process.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. There's a couple of other questions, but I'm going to just walk through the next couple of images, and then I'll pick those up from David and from Deborah, because I think it's nice. We wanted to show a bit of human infrared action, and also we've got some nice detail stuff, which I just want to touch on as well, Adrian.
Sure.
And then maybe we'll rattle through some of these, shall we? And then we'll pick up at we've got about 8 minutes or so ish left. We'll pick up 2 or 3 questions at the end, and if anyone has any, do pop them in now.
Sure.
But shooting people infrared, I mean,
why not? Normally you get wacky skin tones, but you can see here that's all manageable. And this is my lovely wife. She doesn't have purple hair, but she does today. So it's an interesting way to work. So a lot of the conversions often give you really unusual colors for people, but there are ways you can manage that, and this is one example of that.
Yeah. I'm going to keep us rolling just because we've said we've got time things. And I want to hit a couple of these details, Adrian, then I'm going to jump down to some of the slightly more, we'll get there, a couple of slides away.
Sure.
But there's a beautiful detail, abstract stuff as well, like, macro view of the world. Again, just seeing it in a completely different way.
Yeah, so in digital, so with film, the problem with film was focusing, or was, if you tried to do this sort of shot, was focusing, because the infrared light focuses differently through the lens. It's the way that it passes through the lens is not the same as visible light, so it focuses at a different point inside the camera. So you had to have an offset, which normally wouldn't matter for a big distance shot or a big vista, but when you start to get close up, you can have an offset and the pictures would look soft. Again, this is where digital cameras are so great, because if you're focusing the image onto the main sensor, so if you've got a mirrorless camera, you can zoom in and get that pinch up in the same way as you would with any other kind of shooting. So, and there's a good example here. And I think that the way that, wild flowers and so on are rendered up, it, can be really beautiful.
Yeah, I think that black background just really, they just pop out, don't they? That's kind of like a studio shot. A studio still life is what that kind of shouts at me as well.
Absolutely.
And then we've got, obviously more of a flip reverse on using the color in a different way.
So this is actually old Harry's rocks.
Oh yes, not far from
lying
me.
on the ground, pointing up.
Yeah, that was you, was it? Right.
That was
What I want to do, Adrian, I'm going to jump ahead a couple because I really want to get to here.
Okay.
Because we've got a few in the graveyard. I never thought we would cover graveyards on a live stream.
Well,
we're breaking new ground.
So a really great friend of mine out in the States, a guy called Chuck Van Zyl. He's a fabulous guy, and he's a musician. And I knew him first as a musician, but when we went out to see him out in the States, he turned out to be a photographer as well. And he used to shoot in graveyards in black and white on an old Besser camera with black and white film with a super wide 12mm lens. And he had the most amazing pictures of angels and really otherworldly images in graveyards. I thought I'd never had considered that as a thing to do, but ever since then, I can't help but nip into a graveyard. This one is just around the corner from us, so it's walking distance from where we live, and it's an old abandoned graveyard. So it's one that we may well use as part of the group to go visit. I think it just adds that spookiness.
I think that's it, isn't it? And I think that, like we've sort of alluded to a few times tonight, it's connecting the dots with, okay, now this is a different way I can see the world. How can I apply that creative? What scenarios might be good for me to apply this within to kind of put a slightly different spin on things? And that's it's cool. I really like these. We also wanted to, very briefly, Adrian, then I'm going to bring us to a close because we've got a couple of questions that I want to hit with everyone as well. Couple here at the end using different techniques. We've talked about sort of stacking up, combining techniques, I suppose, here, aren't we?
Yeah. So, ICM, why not? And long exposures, multi-exposure, maybe. Why not? All of those things can work. It's just a different rendering. This is actually, there's no movement here. This is just defocus. So this is bokeh. Okay, so infrared bokeh. And it looks like, it's actually a couple of trees, but they look furry palm trees or something like that.
I'm thinking feathers.
Feathers, absolutely.
Vegas showgirl.
Maybe, and I'm a big fan of out of focus stuff. I mean, you've got to go there. That's it can create beautiful imagery. That's nice. So a little bit of movement, a little bit of lightness in the foliage and so on can help. This was very dark actually. Down in I think it was somewhere on Dartmoor, I think, but so it just helps to lift the dark tones and stop them from being completely blocked up. I'm using infrared if you've got a little bit of light around. And I've even used the infrared camera, my full spectrum infrared camera on Astro. How about that?
What?
Why not?
Well, that's another talk, everyone. We'll cover Astro infrared. I might need to lie down before that one. Right, we're going to use the last couple of minutes. Thank you, Adrian, as ever, for all your technical expertise and also your very interesting photographs. And I think what's great is you put a nice plethora of stuff in here so that we could really give people a taste of different things. That was the goal tonight. It's kind of to see literally what you can't see, I suppose, with infrared. Lovely. Let me whip that screen off. I'm going to hit through a couple of questions fast here at the end. They've got 4 or 5, and if anyone has any, now's your time. Give us 2 more minutes, everyone. So, David, do polarizers have any effect on IR?
Not much. Needed ND filters, needed the grads. So they're all based on optical light, pretty much. So whilst they're not entirely useless, they're not very effective. So typically you just don't expect anything.
Cool. Deborah, it's possible to use a lower filter, on the iPhone. So
a 650. So if you think about our vision goes from about 420 something like that to 700 or so. So 650 is actually encroaching in on the red part of the visible spectrum. So you're including genuine red alongside the infrared. I've played with it a bit. You get a different effect, but if anything, as you go further into the visible spectrum, what you're doing is you're diminishing the infrared element of it. So you're kind of trading visible light against the infrared. So you're starting to get back to more conventional imagery, if you like. But it does have a place, and you can get you can go down to 590. I think you can get filters that low. I've got a selection of those. I've tried them and I don't get on with them that well at the moment, but maybe I just haven't spent enough time with them.
Yeah. Okay. And final one I'm just going to hit, because we've obviously been talking about this partly just because it's an interesting topic and I like to try and mix up what we're talking about on the stream, but also obviously Adrian does have a workshop coming up, as we've said, at the end of May 2024. There are a couple of spaces available on that. So lightandland.co.uk, you can find out all the information. North Devon, capture to print, as Adrian has alluded to. So it's the full thing. You're going to go away, A, knowing everything you need to know about how it's working technically, B, with a few prints, and C, full of inspiration about how you can apply some of this in your own photographic work as well.
Yeah.
There is a question though from Paula, which I don't want to throw at you right now, but I'm going to. Are you going to run any more workshops after May this year? Do we know that, Adrian? Is that something we can say or not say?
So yeah,
infrared
it's
specific. Obviously.
Infrared. Yeah, infrared has been a permanent part of my sort of annual agenda for the last 4 or 5 years. So I bought this infrared workshop to Light and Land for the first time this year. So it's not going to be the last, I'm sure. So
stay tuned.
Yeah, absolutely. So we haven't planned next year's one, but the chances are it's going to be in a similar time frame, I'm guessing.
Okay, cool. So Paula, just stay tuned to the lightandland.co.uk site and or the newsletter where all these things get announced. Mike, very interesting hour. Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for all your interaction with us as well, which is really cool. Very important one here, just before we finish, Tim. What ale are you drinking?
Hobgoblin.
Oh, okay. He's on the Hobgoblin, and I'm on the pint of gin / water. And let's go. Barbara is saying, "Great evening. Thank you very much." Okay,
thank you, Barbara.
Cool. So yes, there's a lot we could have covered. Obviously, these are not intended to be a to Z how to do everything, because it's very difficult for us to cover that remotely on a live stream. But we hope the point was to give you some ideas of different examples of infrared photography and get you stimulated by it. That's the thing. And now it can be the start of your journey, whether that's on the workshop, whether that's just exploring more examples of it and seeing people's work, and or going out and using it a bit on your phone. That sounds like probably the cheapest way in to start with.
Absolutely.
And there's all sorts of resources out there when you want to dive in a bit deeper. Courses you can find online, pay for, and or obviously if you come to a workshop, that's the most all-encompassing way to do it. But we appreciate everybody watching along. Thank you very much as ever. Adrian, huge thank you for coming on the stream as ever. Thank you very much. And we will be back at some point in due course with a schedule which is to be determined. So that's about as vague a political answer as I can give at this point. But we'll say good night for now, and we'll see you again soon. Cheerio for now. Bye-bye.